Welcome back to the IBFP. Here's your host, Boxing New.
Welcome back, fight fans. Welcome back to another Raw Truth Q&A with the IBFP. And we just got to be honest, we're the only channel out here telling you the truth. A lot of channels lie to you. A lot of channels avoid the tough and hard questions, but we don't. We give it to you honest, unbiased, and give you the raw truth each and every time. And the first question today comes from Sonny Valentine. He basically states, is it safe to assume that Canelo Alvarez will not be fighting in September? And to answer that, and this is according to Roberto Diaz of Golden Boy, he's basically states that is still up in the air. I think September 12th is getting too close where it's not possible, but hopefully it is. So it looks like these guys are still working on it, but it's likely not going to happen as we approach the date, and the zone is not looking like they're going to move. So at the end of the day, we're hoping Canelo Alvarez gets to face on that, get the fight on September on the holiday, but it may not happen simply because the zone is moving at a snail's pace and they don't want to pay Canelo Alvarez his $30 million. And at the end of the day, Canelo Alvarez, I've seen a lot of people say, well, he should take pay cuts. He's taking 2 pay cuts. A lot of people don't realize Canelo Alvarez is taking 2 pay cuts to make this happen. With no live gate, he's already taken a pay cut, and then he's taking an additional pay cut from sponsorships and revenue. So if he's taking 2 pay cuts, the zone doesn't want to honor any of their contractual obligations. We got to be honest and unbiased. And then the next question comes from Whyte, and he states, who do you think won the Andy Ruiz versus Joseph Parker fight? That's a toss-up. You can pretty much pick either guy, so I have no problem with that. I watched the fight multiple times, and there was different times I picked Andy to win, and other times I picked Joe Parker to win based on what I saw in the ring. It was a close, competitive, good fight. A lot of people saw it as a robbery fight because Joseph Parker was in his home country in New Zealand. So that was a very good fight. It was a toss-up, and it was a close fight, but it was also controversial. So it's pretty much up to you and what you believe, but at the end of the day, these guys need a rematch to settle the score. The next one comes from La Paza, and he states, what's your take on Dillian Whyte versus Alexander Povetkin? I think that's a good fight. I think a lot of people don't give Alexander Povetkin the credit. He's an accomplished fighter. He's a very good fighter. And at the end of the day, Dillian Whyte is not facing a tomato can. He's not facing a bum. He could have been facing the worst of the worst, but he likes to challenge himself. And this is still a somewhat risky fight because Alexander Povetkin still has a lot of pop in his shot. And he could make it a hard and difficult fight for Dillian Whyte at points. But at the end of the day, Dillian Whyte, I believe, is the top 5, heavyweight right now. And, he has power. He has boxing ability. He can disguise some of his shots. So I give Dillian Whyte the credit, and I believe Dillian Whyte should win this fight rather convincingly and may even win by stoppage. So I give Dillian Whyte the credit. A lot of people will hate on Dillian Whyte. They don't like Dillian Whyte. But we got to be real about it. Dillian Whyte is a good fighter. Camelback says, what's your take on women's boxing scene right now, especially after the fight against Cecilia Braekhus and Jessica McCaskill? And I think, women's boxing is on the rise. It's on the come up. It's getting explosive and it's very exciting. And, my take on it right now is I think that Michaela Mayer, if she moved up in weight, she could beat Jessica McCaskill, in my opinion. That's my opinion. I believe she could move up in weight and put the smackdown on Jessica McCaskill, but that's just my opinion on it. The next question comes from Robert Justice. He says, what's it going to take for you to view Errol Spence as one of the best boxers in boxing? Oh, that's very simple. That's a very simple question. I'm going to give you a very simple answer. Just fight Terrence Crawford and beat him. Then I'll view you as one of the best boxers in boxing. That's all you have to do. Facing him at 147, unify his belt, and then you'll get all the credit in the world. There's no denying your greatness at that point. But he stated that he wants to take an easy road and intentionally avoid the Terrence Crawford fight. So how am I going to view a guy who's looking to face dudes who's already been beat and who are not world champions? Let's just be honest about it. The next question comes from Sosa, and he said, where you been is my question. And so, we haven't done many live streams as of late, but we are bringing that back. We're working on something special in the Rinse Do edition live stream coming soon. Stay tuned. The next question comes from Gatnuck, and he states, you think Spence will finally fight Crawford if he beats Danny Garcia? And I'm going to answer this very honest and, real as I can. Hell no. hell no, he won't fight Terrence Bud Crawford if he beats Danny Garcia. He's going to find another reason to delay the fight, to duck the fight, to avoid the fight. This is who Errol Spence is. If you don't know, now you know. The next question comes from Kwam, and he states, what's your favorite boxer of all time? I don't have one particular favorite of all time. I have a couple. I have, Roy Jones Jr. is one of my favorites. I have Chavez Sr. is one of my favorites. I have Ali is one of my favorites, and I have Pernell Whitaker is one of my favorites. I don't really have one particular favorite. I like a lot of what all of these guys bring to the table. They're entertaining, they're exciting, and so I like to mix it up on who I think is great. Richard Castaway states, what's the difference between Danny Garcia and Sergey Derevyanchenko? These guys have a lot of similarities. Both of these guys have lost the fights at the top, but Danny Garcia is more of a decorated champion for his past accomplishments at 140. But I think the biggest difference is that Sergey Derevyanchenko is on the upswing and Danny Garcia is on the downswing. It looks like their trajectories are going in opposite directions. And Sergey Derevyanchenko, looks like he's improving. Danny Garcia, he seems to be the same lethargic fighter he's always been. But great question. The next one comes from Johnny Granillo, and he states Vergil Ortiz versus Keith Thurman. Who wins? I think that's a very good fight. I think Keith Thurman still gives most welterweights hell, and I don't think he's a pushover or easy fight for anybody. Do not get that wrong. But I think we've seen Keith Thurman hurt to the body against Leonard Bundu. We've seen him hurt against Manny Pacquiao. I think Vergil Ortiz, with his power, with his corner, and a guy like Robert Garcia training out of the Robert Garcia Boxing Academy, I think Vergil Ortiz getting the experience that he needs, stepping up in competition, I would edge him to beat Keith Thurman, and potentially by knockout right now. Great question. The next one comes from Talk Sense. He say, do you think it's a disgrace that Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren in the UK don't make an effort to show PBC fight, or is it Al Heyman to blame that the UK fans struggle to watch PBC? Look, my thoughts on this is this. At the end of the day, it's not Eddie Hearn or Frank Warren's job to play PBC fights in the UK, whether they're with Sky or BT Sport. They don't own or run either one of those organizations, so if Sky or BT simply wanted some of those fights or cards on their stations, they could simply air them and pay for the rights. But that's not Frank Warren or Eddie Hearn's call or decision to make, so we got to be real about it. At the end of the day, it's the PBC's own fault and own doing, and Al Heyman, who has to promote his organization nationally, internationally, to get these guys to become international stars. That's not on Frank or Eddie. Let's be honest. The next one comes from Israel Diaz, and he said, hey, Nuke, why don't people give Canelo the credit he deserves from completely outboxing Danny Jacobs? That was a great win for Canelo. Jacobs is a top high-level elite boxer and was an IBF champion. That was one of Canelo's best victories, and people just ignored that fight and pretend like it never happened. And when people were saying that Canelo was ducking Jacobs, I agree 100%, and Jacobs was also in his prime. And when I look at it like this, people ignore the fact that Canelo fought a prime world champion who's a very difficult and has a slick style, and Canelo Alvarez cleanly, clearly, and convincingly won that fight with no controversy. But I think if Demetrius Andre beat Danny Jacobs, he'd get praise from here to the mountaintop. I think that, if Jamal Charlo beat Danny Jacobs, he would get praise from here to the mountaintop. The problem with these fanboys is they don't keep the same energy with everybody. With Canelo, he could do something great and they'll give him no credit. And you could see Andrade or Charlo do something simple and they'll praise these guys by getting on their knees. Let's be honest and unbiased. The next one comes from, AB Cuts, my brother, and he states, you think Sergey Derevyanchenko has to knock out Charlo to win? These judges are crooks, and I agree 100%. We keep seeing robberies, and I think Jamal Charlo on a PBC card, I think he would edge Sergey Derevyanchenko if it came to a decision on the cards, not because he's a better boxer, because we already know that Jamal tuned up Charlo. His boxing skills were exposed against, Matt Korobov. I think that, at the end of the day, Sergey Derevyanchenko is in danger of getting robbed on the cards. So I think that he really needs to look for a knockout at some point in this fight. Great question. The next one comes from Soccer Training Club. Salute, family. And in Soccer Training Club basically states, David the Giant Benavidez not ready for the face of boxing, Peli Rojo, Canelo Alvarez. And I just don't believe so. I think David Benavidez has the potential to be a great and elite fighter. I got a lot of confidence in what David Benavidez can be, but at this point, at this age, and his lack of experience at the top and elite level, I just don't think he's ready for Canelo. I see Canelo Alvarez dismantling David Benavidez. His size and power alone won't be enough to compete with Canelo, who has a massive underrated skill set. Let's be honest. The next one comes from J1516, and he states, it seems like Lopez versus Lomas happening. What are your thoughts on this fight? I think it's an excellent fight. I think, and it could even be as close as a 50-50 fight. We know Vasyl Lomachenko can get hit. We've seen him hurt against Luke Campbell, who doesn't have Teofimo's power. But we also seen Teofimo struggle with a boxer in Nakatani who had a different skill set. So we could see this fight going either way. It's right down the middle. It's going to be a fantastic fight. I haven't made a prediction as of yet. A great question. The next one comes from Chain TC, and he states, how was Spence ducking Crawford? How did Wilder duck Whyte when Whyte didn't do the title eliminator against Luis Ortiz? Look, I'm going to be honest with you about this guy. He's asked this question probably a million times, and I made a million different videos explaining all of these topics. At the end of the day, you need to go to IBFP University and do your research. Let's be honest and unbiased, and stop watching Boxing Ego. And let's get to the next one. Jose Garcia. He states, do you think David Benavidez should go up to 175, and will Canelo Alvarez get a shot at the WBC belt? Benavidez lost on the scale. So next, getting a shot at the WBC belt, the mandatories have to fight for the belt, and then after that, then Canelo Alvarez will be able to face the winner of whoever arises with the belt after that. David Benavidez, I think he should still get another shot to make weight at 168. I think this was simply just a slip up, and I think that he understands that he made a mistake, and we've been going through a pandemic, so I'm willing to chalk it up as an honest mistake. If he misses weight again, he needs to move up to 175. Great question. The next one comes from Danny PJ. Do you think the decision by the judges that favored Raleigh discredit the PBC, and do you think that Raleigh, being a Mayweather fighter, has anything to do with such a horrible decision? Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, we've seen robberies on the PBC, but people like to ignore them. We've seen, Jamal Charlo get away with one against Matt Korobov. We've seen these things before. And, we've seen Errol Spence get away with one against Sean Porter, and now we've seen Raleigh Romero get away with one. So I'm not surprised this happens on the PBC time and time again, and people simply ignore it. The big name, 99.9% of the time, gets the win. And the next one comes from Toxic Rick, and he states, how would you grade Benavidez's fight last night? I would have to give him a B plus maybe at this point. Angulo was a fighter who had only lost once in his career to Zuro Ramirez, and he was never knocked out throughout his entire career, and David Benavidez no mas this guy. So I give him all the credit in the world for it, but I think that he's young and experienced, and he's still growing that experience, and I think this was a good fight to help him grow, but we have not seen the best of David Benavidez. The next question comes from Chris. Chris states, I personally think that David Benavidez did miss the scale to reel in the fight with Canelo. Thoughts? I don't think so at all. If you don't have a belt, why would Canelo be interested? Notice he's made offers to champions. We got to be honest and unbiased. But once again, it's the Unbiased Raw Truth Q&A with the IBFP. Salute.